On the phone with me this evening is Adam Gomez, the drummer for the Dickies. Hey, Adam.
Hey, Mikey. How's it going, man? I hope everything is well. By the way, I forgot to ask, where are you?
We're in, I'm in Western Kentucky.
Okay, got it.
So we say y'all.
Someone else in Kentucky is that I know actually is Hoglog from the Queers. He actually lives in Kentucky.
Oh yeah, man, I love that band.
Yeah, man. I think he's born and raised there.
Nope.
And Joe, he's in Atlanta. Joe Queer, the singer. But yeah, Hoglog, man, he's a huge teddy bear, man. He's just the coolest.
See, I didn't even know that. They were just in Nashville not too long ago.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I spoke to Joe a couple nights ago, and they were in Texas about 2 days ago. So that had to have been the same kind of tour, that same leg of the tour they were doing.
I'll just have to tell you what a coincidence it is that I'm talking to you. Years ago, I interviewed an actor by the name of Sean Astin. Do you know where this is going?
No. So you're gonna have to play it out.
Sean Astin's parents are Patty Duke and John Astin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
John Astin played Gomez Adams on the Addams Family.
Oh, there you go. I missed that.
And now I have Adam Gomez on the phone. So that's just the seven degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon or whatever it's called.
I think that's correct.
We're here now. Adam, let's talk about music. You've been playing drums for a long time, and now you're in a legendary punk band, the Dickies. Just talk about how you got your start.
Well, actually, when it came down to getting into the punk scene itself, which obviously leads into the Dickies, I was playing in a LA-based punk band called Bloodhook. They were really hard workers. It was a three-piece, a guitarist who sang, and then bass player who did backups and just did bass, and they needed a drummer one day, and I actually found them on Craigslist. And I had just graduated from MI. I got my degree in performance percussion, and I was looking for a tour, and I didn't care if it paid money or not. It was just something that I needed to do, and that was, I already chose my path, and that was it, and I needed to start somewhere, right? So I decided to go on Craigslist and see, maybe someone needs a drummer, maybe someone needs someone for a show.
Was punk your genre of choice, or did you just fall into it?
No, actually, throughout my childhood, I was really into, and thanks to my big brother, Sean, I really got into metal and then punk rock. And my real segue into punk rock was the first Suicidal Tendencies record. And I heard that on cassette when I was maybe 8 or 7. And and that was, that album was totally my jam as a little kid, man. And I didn't even see a difference between metal and punk at that point. Because, even with that album, as an example, the first Suicidal record, you've got punk rock with, heavy metal lead guitars in it. So, I was blind to the whole crossover thing. And so when I listened to metal and then listened to punk, it was a smooth segue with that Suicidal album. So, yeah, I've been into punk rock ever since I was a little kid.
There was a while there that punk rock did do that kind of crossed over with bands like Dirty Rotten Imbeciles and Suicidal Tendencies, and I know exactly what time you're talking about because I'm a lot older than you, and I was up to a lot of stuff back then.
So yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and going from being a little kid, going from metal and listening to Iron Maiden and the Big Four, like Megadeth, Anthrax, Metallica, and Slayer. Those being definite bands that I listen to all the time. And like I said, I was influenced by my brother. He's about 3.5 years older than me, and I wanted to do everything he did and be everywhere he was and listen to everything he did, so. And I have no idea where he got inspired. My dad, he listened to a whole lot of different stuff. So it's not like my dad really or my mom for that matter, jammed any kind of music down our throats, at that moment in time in my life. So I don't know where the heck he got his first Iron Maiden cassette or any of that stuff. But when he brought it home, then obviously I was being introduced to it. So
well, the same thing happened to me too. I fell into punk the same way. I was a metalhead, and I was playing in a metal band, and our drummer was in my metal band as well. And we kind of fell into it with some other guys, and he was like, "We're gonna play punk." So we got together, and they loved it, and I was like, "I don't know about this." And, it just kind of grew, and I was like, well, this is pretty good. So I fell into it, too, back in the 80s. About the same time I saw the band you're in right now, the Dickies. Tell us how you hooked up with those guys.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll continue the story from there. So I went from Bloodhook, finding them on Craigslist, and they needed a drummer for a European tour. And, it just, light bulb went off in my head right there, man. I'm like, this is it. This is the one that's going to start me off, getting the ball rolling for real, So I met with them, and the night before I met with them, I actually got in contact with them, and they said, hey, here's the album. Check out the songs, and let's set up a tryout, right? So, I listened to a few songs, and by the way, Dusty Watson did drums on that album, on that recording of for Bloodhook. Dusty Watson, he plays for the Sonics. He used to play for Dick Dale, rest in peace. He's played for a lot of people. He's played for Agent Orange and Bloodhook. So anyway, I listened to a few of the tracks, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool, man. I dig it. It sounds great. It's got a good, I liked the feel of it, the vibe of that punk rock vibe they had. And I hit them back, and they're like, yeah, sure, I can learn two or three by tomorrow, and I'll show up, we'll bang it out. And they hit me back saying, well, no, we're kind of hoping you do the whole album tomorrow. And it was like 9 or 11 tracks. So I'm like, sure. As a quote unquote professional drummer, right? When you want to get gigs, you say yes now and you figure it out later.
That's right.
That's kind of how it goes, right? So anyway, I did exactly that. I did my homework, and I kind of did a once through of listening to each song. And as I would listen to it, I would notate, and I would kind of like a shorthand version of transcribing the drums, right? So I'd kind of write it out. And this is where my music education comes in from MI. I was trained to do that. Before I went there, I couldn't read music. I couldn't write music. I couldn't transcribe. I couldn't do any of that. So anyway, I'm using the skills that I just learned, and I'm doing really quick versions of writing these songs out, and I'm kind of using my ear and my memory as well at the same time. So I show up to the to the tryout the next day, and I end up getting the gig. We do the European tour. I actually spent a lot of money to actually do that tour instead of making any money, right? A year later, I'm still in the band. The singer he calls me up and says, hey, DI needs a drummer for a night. And DI, just in case no one here knows who they are, and I'm sure most people do on this show, they're an Orange County punk band. And Casey Royer fronts the band, and he actually was the original drummer for the Adolescents. Rumor has it, and I believe it's true, he actually helped start Social Distortion. He was one of the original members, back when Social Distortion was kind of an idea and was barely being sprouted into an actual band. But anyway, so they needed a drummer for one show, and I was so excited, man, that was, I couldn't even believe I was even being considered for that. And I mean, in my head this whole time, that's what I wanted to happen. That was in my, quote unquote plan of doing things and doing great things, with my skill. So, Clinton Kelton from DI calls me up and, says, hey man, I'm going to send you the set list. Are you cool with this? The show's at, I think it was in Reseda. I forget the name of the club. But anyway, we have one rehearsal. I meet Clinton in person. I meet Eddie Tatter, which is totally brother from another mother now, man. That guy's got my back all the time. He plays bass for DI, and he plays bass for Dickies, which at the time I did not know. And actually, I think when I played that gig with them, with DI, I'm not even sure he was playing with Dickies at that moment in time. But anyway, as the story unfolds, he does. So I do the gig with DI. I actually got paid for it, which was awesome. I was super over the moon, playing for one of the punk bands I grew up listening to and getting some cash for it. You can only imagine how cool that is.
No kidding.
Yeah, man. And I was just over the moon about it, man. Just so excited. And to top it all off, and I know I'm kind of trailing off, but I have to tell the story, man. I'm sorry. Just to top off that night, playing that show with DI, front and center, and I believe it was during Hang 10 in East Berlin, which is the DI song, right in the middle of it, I look up, and I see Jeff Henman, the late guitarist for Slayer, I believe with a Heineken in his hand, just headbanging and just yelling out the words, man. He knew all the words to the DI songs, man. And I forgot, he's a huge, punk rock fan, and he was there. And I'm looking up, just tripping out at the fact that I'm actually playing drums for DI, let alone that. And then I look up and I see Jeff Henman, another, metalhead hero of mine.
Yes, Slayer. Slayer covered Richard Hung Himself.
Yeah. On that, what was it? Undisputed Attitude. I think that was 96. And the album came out. Yeah, Undisputed Attitude, Spiritual Law, which is another DI song. So, just it all came together there at that moment, and I was a part of it, and I just felt so lucky, man. It was blowing my mind. I was trying so hard not to mess up.
That's awesome, though.
Witnessing that.
Plus, you got to tour Europe and at a discount. A lot of people are thinking, well, you might not have made a lot of money doing it. You might even had to spend some, but you got the opportunity to tour Europe.
Exactly, man. Absolutely. And honestly, no, it wasn't even at a discount. I really did, take a lot out of my pocket that I didn't even have at the moment. I had to figure out how to pay for my plane ticket. I ended up selling, at the time I had 2 drum sets. I had I think it was like the first one I ever bought. And then I had just bought another one like a year before that happened. Before we had that tour with Bloodhook, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for the ticket, so I had to put my drum set up on, I don't know what it was, Craigslist, the Recycler, and whatever else I can find online to put up for sale on, and I sold it, and that was part of me paying my way to get through that tour.
And it was totally worth it too, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I absolutely believe that if I didn't do that, if I didn't put myself through that first tour, which, I'm not trying to make it sound like it was terrible or torture, but it was a little bit rough, at times, and we had, a little bit of unfortunate times on that trip. I absolutely believe if I didn't go through that with that band, I would not be near where I am now. And there's still a whole, lot of path to tread from the point where I am now going forward, but still, there's a huge adventure that I've been through, and there's even more, on the way. So getting back to leading up to the Dickies, I played that gig, phenomenal gig, Jeff Henman, DI, playing with DI, and after that, I think it was like maybe a half year later, I was out visiting a friend, Kevin. He used to do a lot of like website stuff for me and YouTube stuff for me, just a close friend. We had just been having sushi. We met up to, eat sushi because we hadn't been seeing each other that often, so we'd meet up every now and again and eat sushi at this certain place. And I remember leaving, and then my cell phone rings, and it's Eddie. It's Eddie Tatter from DI. And I'm like, oh, cool, man, he's going to call me for another gig, So I pick up, and we catch up for a second, and he says, hey, you got a passport? I said, yeah. Can you tour? Yeah. He's like, all right, I'm going to get you an audition with the Dickies. I'm like, what? How is this happening, And it turns out he had just joined them in 2012, and when I first met him was probably 2010. 2 years later, through this journey, this musical journey, jumping from kind of band to band, because even before Bloodhook, I had my own band for about 10 years by then. But anyhow, it all led up to that phone call, really, and Eddie kind of led the way for me into that band, basically. He told me, hey, man, learn these songs. Everyone's only going to learn a few, but if you really want this, you need to learn a whole lot more than that. Do your homework, learn the live versions, find the current ones on YouTube, just hammer it out, man. And if you want it, then you got to do the work. And I did. And he even offered to do like a mock tryout with me, so to speak. We met up at the place he rehearsed at, and we just went through the Dickie songs that I learned, just drums and bass. No vocals, no guitars, no cues, no nothing. And that really conditioned me to get through the actual audition, smoothly. So anyway, there was quite a few guys auditioning for the Dickies, guys that I heard about where I'm like, what? How am I going to compete with this guy? There's no way. I'm like, no one knows who I am, first off. I'm just some young kid, given I wasn't that young, but compared to, some of the other guys trying out that were more mature drummers and known in the punk scene, it's like, dude, why are they going to care that me, this kid they don't even know of, that isn't even from their area, why are they even going to care? I guess we'll find out, right? So I go do the audition, and Stan Lee, the infamous Stan Lee, starts calling off song names, right? And we did, I think, 3 of them. And then, Eddie kind of jumps in and says, hey, yeah, we can do more. You want to do more? And then Stan looks at me like, huh? I'm like, yeah, let's do another one. And Eddie starts calling them off. Which one do you want to do? Nights in White Satin or this and this and that? And I'm like, yeah, let's do that one. And Stan's kind of like looking confused, like, what? This kid knows these songs?
His homework.
And, that same night, I believe it was February, and that night my wife and I back then engaged by then. No, we were still dating, close to being engaged, but still dating. We were celebrating Valentine's Day that night, and I remember us being. I took her to this spa place, right? Not spa, but hot tub place. It's really cool out in up in the mountains in the Pomona Hills over here in SoCal, and we're having a good time and everything. And then I think I got a text or a call, and I think it was Eddie, that told me, hey man, it seems really good, and he told me you swept the floor, man, with your you swept the floor with everybody else, dude. You did great, and it just made me feel really good, and I think Stan kind of finalized it pretty much that night, and I was just so excited, man. I kind of couldn't believe it, because I also grew up a Dickies fan.
Was about 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's been 6 years. Oh yeah, it was February of 2013 when I became a Dickies member.
So what are the Dickies up to now?
Well, as far as myself, just as an independent artist, I'm still doing drums for Dickies, of course, but since then, I've still subbed for DI here and there. I've played with CJ Ramone. We did like a special TV performance. It was like a 4th of July thing for a certain news channel, and that was really special. And I ended up doing a tour with the Adolescents and doing a couple of one-off shows with them as well. And just along the way, just really making friends, making good friends. Another good friend would be Steve Soto, and that's another guy that came into my life since starting with the Dickies. Rest in peace, Steve. He was like a godsend to me, man. He was so encouraging. Him along with Eddie Tatter, two bass players. These guys are just so encouraging. Not really like trying to fill my head up with blow my head up into a balloon or fill my ego or anything like that. Because Lord knows musicians have enough of that, right? But they just made me feel like to have faith in myself about working hard for what I want. They really made sense of that and made me feel like, yeah, man, you can do some big stuff as long as you're on it and you work hard for it, man. You can get it, And Steve told me he saw that in me, and it was that really stuck with me, when Steve told me that. So he's one of the the good friends I made along the way, and just all the Adolescents guys, man. Those guys are like brothers to me, and the DI guys, they're like brothers to me. CJ's super cool, and actually how I got the CJ gig was through Steve Soto. I believe he did not just live shows, but I think he worked on records with CJ, him and Dan Root. And Dan Root played for Rick L. Rick, I think Tender Fury, and he'd been in the Adolescents for some years. And they were actually playing with CJ, and CJ needed a drummer at the time. And I believe Pete Sosa is his usual drummer. That guy rips, man. That guy's awesome. But he couldn't make the performance, and it was a really important thing. So Steve just brought up my name, and that was it, And then all of a sudden I'm getting a call from CJ Ramone. I mean, how wacky is that?
CJ's a great guy. I've talked to him before, and we're both bass players. He even told me he started out playing bass with a jazz bass and then switched to a P bass like our hero Dee Ramone played.
I saw the bass that he had at that performance we played, and he had, I forget the little metal plate, at the bottom base of the neck, but in the back of the body. What I don't know what the name of that plate is. I forget, but
was it the Dee Ramone tribute bass?
I don't think it was that one in particular, but he had a bass that had like a Ramones emblem on it, on that little plate. It was pretty awesome. Was it
a white bass?
No, that one wasn't white.
It's been a while since I talked to.
If you look it up on YouTube, you can totally see it, because I think the TV channel that we played for, I believe they ended up putting it out on YouTube.
I saw the Dickies open for the Ramones in the late '80s, and that had to be one of the best shows that I've ever been to.
Nice. Yeah, I hear stories sometimes from Stan and Leonard. Every now and again, they'll squeeze out a jewel of a story between him and Leonard and Joey, or just the bands in general. About back in that era. Excuse me. So yeah, it's pretty interesting being with the Dickies guys, man. Those guys are nuts.
Yeah, they're a great band, and you're living the dream.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can say that, man. I mean, considering that I grew up a fan, that's kind of what happened. I grew up a fan of these bands that I play drums for now, and it's just when I kind of step back and think about, well, what would my 13, 12-year-old self think of me now? Like, man, that guy is freaking cool.
You'd be too cool to hang out with.
And then my 12-year-old self will get mad at that and jealous, and then beat the old self up. I'm sure. Yeah.
And now you're living the punk rock life. You were telling me about all the stuff that you had to do right before we did this interview.
Total hardcore, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember the list I gave you. It said I had to. I was bringing dinner home for the wife and baby, and then we were going to have dinner time, and then I was going to clean up the baby food stuff, and then we were going to get her a bath, and then let her play, and then put her to bed, and then wash the baby dishes. Yeah, it's pretty. It's punk rock stuff, man.
Well, working in radio for years, I've had the opportunity to hang out backstage with many bands. And when I first started, I was like, oh man, this is what I've always wanted since I was a kid. And I've seen Van Halen on the stage, and then I go backstage, I'm like, oh my, these are my heroes. And then I'm like, well, this is boring. You're just sending around.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I know there's glitz and glamour to the whole thing, into the whole, quote unquote rock and roll life and the rock star life, and that's cool. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of guys out there, guys or girls, and whatever, that are out there purposely, intentionally living the rock and roll life, the typical or stereotypical one, I should say, which is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I get it, cool, that's your thing, that's your thing, but that doesn't mean that, once you go backstage to a concert, that it's just all happening, it's not really the case, man. It's not reality, There's
only so much of that you can do.
Yeah, and even in, within the existing scene of old school punk rock bands and rock bands, it's like those guys have already been through it, man. They've been through the ringer more than anyone can imagine. And a lot of them realize that they're lucky to still be alive, and so they know better. They've already done that. They're bored of that stuff, They're on a different level now,
Well, when we were kids and we would go to punk rock shows and we would watch shows, and I was in a band, we wouldn't go to bed until the sun was coming up, and sometimes not even then. Now it's like, hey, I gotta be in my chair by 9 o'clock to see the news, and it's lights out before midnight. I can't stay up that late.
And I'm not even the youngest one in the band. I mean, I'm fairly young. Well, I don't want to say that. What I will say is I'm the second youngest in the band, right? I'm 37 now. Pretty sure that's correct. Yeah, 37. And even 30, maybe a 60-year-old might tell me, man, you're still a baby, you're still young. And I get that. I get how they see that, but it's like, dude, when I get up in the morning, my back is hurting now.
Yeah.
And, I'm walking like a mummy when I get out of bed now. And at night, I'm, fighting for dear life to stay up. It's like, it's already happening, man.
Yeah.
I'm already on that road.
I remember it happened. I turned 50 this year. I've gone past what you're going through to now I have to get home and prop my feet up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's probably not, and I'm sure it's not like a habit thing. It's because your feet hurt.
Yeah, I have to prop them up.
Gotta be up.
I have to prop him up. Well, Marky Ramone's still touring. He's a legendary drummer from the Ramones after Tommy, and he has to work out to keep up with his schedule. He's older than I am, and he works out a lot to keep in shape and play with those guys.
Yeah, I would imagine so, man. And that he's like a machine. He just keeps going. I'll see posts from Greg Hetson from Punk Rock Karaoke. He's played for Bad Religion and Red Cross and Circle Jerks. And by the way, Circle Jerks are actually getting back together and doing some tours.
I saw that. They're going to be at Punk Rock Bowling.
Yeah. You've heard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, man. So I'm excited for Greg. But like I was saying, I'll see Greg's posts, and he actually plays for Marty. And so I'll see, their tours and them going out to like Greece and Italy and stuff like that. It's like, I've been to a lot of places, man, and I haven't been to those spots. So it's still wondrous to me, and it's still, amazing seeing Greg out there with Marky, and Marky's still doing his thing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he's a machine. And I'm name dropping right here, but Marky's got an identical twin brother named Fred Bell. And Fred is an excellent guitar player, and he played with Marky some in a band called Teost and one called Stoop Patrol. And if you haven't heard Marky's brother Fred play, well, there's a whole new level of punk you may have never heard before with those guys.
Dude, I had no idea he had a twin. That's blowing my mind, dude.
Yeah, you can find him on my Facebook page. He's his identical twin brother, and his name is Fred Bell.
So it's not like a secret thing or anything like that? It's just...
Nah, it's not secret. They're from Bronx, New York. I mean, they're all proud. If anybody from Bronx, they all know each other.
Yeah, okay. That's amazing, dude. I had no idea. You just dropped some knowledge on me. I had no idea he had a twin brother.
Yeah, I sent Fred one of my shirts. I play those guys on my show, and then Fred sends back a picture of Marky holding my shirt, and I was like, wow, what an endorsement.
That's awesome. I saw that picture. That's right.
Yeah, that was all because of Fred.
That's rad. That's so cool.
And I'll turn you on to some Teost. I'll send you some stuff. It's some really good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Throw it at me. And even with the Ramones stuff and getting back to Dickies and Ramones hand in hand, now when we're on tour, a lot of times after shows, whether we get dinner or not, we end up most times stopping at a convenience store like 7-Eleven or whatever, a gas station that's open at 1:32 in the morning, and we'll get snacks, man. We'll get it depends, who's getting the snacks, but, Leonard might get some ding-dongs or ho-hos and some milk, and I'll get some Twinkies and milk or something like that, and Stan will get, I don't know, Stan's favorite is Snickers with almonds. That's one of his favorites now. That's like his thing. And we'll just kind of get junk food at the end of the night, and it just kind of seemed like it was a thing with the band, and me just kind of coming into it, kind of realizing, this is kind of like a thing. I think it was Leonard or Stan, I forget, because both of them tell me a lot of stories about back then, but I think it was Stan, would tell me that Johnny used to kind of, force them out after shows and be like, hey, let's go get some milk and cookies, Go get some milk and cookies. And I guess that was Johnny's thing. And I think he would kind of pull Leonard and Stan his way to do that, or at least Stan, to kind of keep him away from the heroin.
Yeah.
And because Leonard and Stan had a problem, and I think Johnny was trying to kind of help in that way, which when you think about it, kind of is a big help. Well, maybe not. But
both could be equally as addicting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So that kind of became Dickies' repertoire. We kind of, I guess they kind of adopted that naturally in time, over time, and now we kind of do that. So it's one of the many Ramones tree branches of reaching out into people's lives, I guess you can say. And that's an example of them kind of, creeping and getting into the Dickies lives.
Well, you just gave me some inspiration for maybe you go in the studio when you're writing music, and this could be a new punk classic. You could call it a gas station sushi.
Yeah, that can work. Arguably, that can work.
We play with a band, and they had a whole song. What we would do after gigs, we would all go to this 24/7 diner, and they had these things called Rebel Cheeseburgers. Well, anyways, this band wrote a complete album basically around these places we went to after shows, and it's really good stuff. Got a lot of music from experiences.
I guess that's the way to go, right?
Yeah. Adam, I appreciate you calling in, taking some time. And you have a busy schedule. You're a dad. You have a family. How old's your daughter?
She is 2. She was 2 a couple months ago in October.
That's the perfect age. Mine is 17 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's I can't even imagine my daughter being that age.
No.
I can't even fathom it. My brain just cannot imagine that, And I have other friends that are just had a daughter, or have a boy or two, and are having a daughter, and they're freaking out, because they're having a girl, and it's different, when they grow up and all that. And I get that, but I tell them, dude, you have years to worry about that. Don't pull your hair out about it now, man.
No.
You're killing yourself. It's going to make you lose hair and grow gray ones, and, all that's going to happen regardless, dude. So let it happen years down the road. Don't worry about it now.
Yeah, it happens too. That's the truth. Well, I was 33 when I had my son, so now he's 17, so you can do the math. It goes by really quick.
Yeah, I believe you, man. I have a lot of friends that have older kids, and they tell me it goes by so quick, and I'm starting to see it. And she's only 2 years old, and I see it. When you're and you know this, when you're a parent, every little growth that they have, and not even physically, I mean mentally, intellectually, any little progression that happens with them, you see it, and to you as a parent, it's so huge, it's monumental, you can't believe it, and it's so it just touches your heart so deep. But then you step back and you think about how does someone else see this? They just kind of see it as, well, yeah, that's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But as a parent, you're like, oh my God, that's amazing, and when you see all those little ones, you instantly, you have that happiness of seeing that they're progressing and they're learning, but at the same time, you have that feeling of, oh no, she's growing. Oh no, she's getting big. Oh no, she's getting smarter. It's almost like, they're slowly growing bigger, but growing away from you. Their independence is growing, which is obviously great. But as a parent, naturally, you kind of feel scared and sad at the
Yes.
same time that you feel happy.
Mine's getting ready to go away to college next year, and he told me that he just has to get away from this town and try something new. And I told him getting out of his room and not playing Xbox would be something new. But I get that. I was his age, and I got on a plane and I flew to Oregon, and I moved to Oregon. So it just seems like he's not as old as I was when I did it. I can't explain it.
Yeah. No, and that's how we got to look at it as parents, I guess. We have to remember, well, how was I back then? How did I feel back then?
Oh, he's a lot better than I was.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'm sure my daughter will be much smarter than I was, back in my teen years or my adult years, or even now. I'm just so hopeful that she'll be so much better.
Well, their little brains sure do absorb a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah, and as long as we're aware of that, we're aware of that, and we're aware that even though it's not obvious they're listening or watching, they absolutely are. Every inch, every second. Yeah.
I always say, I've heard this term other places too, garbage in, garbage out. So, you put the garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. So put positive stuff in so you don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Adam, I appreciate you calling in tonight, and I enjoyed the conversation and catching up with you, and we look forward to hearing you with the Dickies or subbing for DI, and anytime you have something going on, I invite you to just call me.
Absolutely, man. I'm honored. I mean, it's a pleasure talking with you, man. Talking with a Kentucky fellow here, and man, I really appreciate you spending the time to chat with me, man.
Thanks, Adam. Have a good night.